Tonight, when you plug in your phone, the electricity that fills it has to come from somewhere at that exact second. That's the strange thing about the power grid. It can't really store anything. What you use at 8 p.m. has to be made at 8 p.m. So here's a problem nobody tells you about. Power plants make the most power during the day when everybody wants it. But at night, when the world goes to sleep, they're still running, making electricity that nobody's awake to use. You can't put lightning in a jar, so what do you do with it? In 1963, some engineers in Missouri came up with an answer that sounds completely insane. They decided to build a battery. Not a little battery, a battery the size of a mountain. And 42 years later, at 5 o'clock on a December morning, that battery broke open and sent 1.5 billion gallons of water straight down onto a sleeping family. This is the story of Taum Sauk, and I promise you, it does not end the way you think. Let me show you how the mountain battery works because it's genuinely brilliant. Deep in the St. Francois Mountains of southeast Missouri, the same ancient hills as the old lead belt, there's a peak called Proffit Mountain. And in 1963, the Union Electric Company, the outfit you'd now call Ameren, did something to the top of it. They scraped off the summit and built a giant bowl up there, a reservoir 54 acres wide, sitting 800 feet above the river valley below. Here's the trick. At night, when nobody needs the power, the plant runs its turbines backwards as pumps and shoves water uphill all the way to that bowl on the mountaintop. It's using cheap, wasted 3 in the morning electricity to lift a lake into the sky. And then the next day, when everybody's air conditioners kick on and the grid is screaming for power, they open the gate and all that water comes roaring back down the mountain through the turbines, spinning them the right way this time, generating 450 megawatts of electricity right when it's needed most. That's what a pumped storage plant is. Engineers have a nickname for it. They call it a water battery. You charge it at night by pumping the water up. You drain it by day to get the power back. And Taum Sauk did exactly that every single day for 42 years. But a battery the size of a mountain has a problem the size of a mountain because up in that bowl, 800 feet over the valley, sat 1.5 billion gallons of water, held back by a rock-fill wall. And the entire thing depended on one simple rule that must never, ever be broken. You can never let the bowl overflow. To make sure of that, the reservoir had sensors, gauges, that measured the water level and shut the pumps off automatically when it got near the top. Simple. Foolproof. Except the gauges came loose. The instruments that measured the water level had shifted out of position, and they started reading the level as lower than it actually was. So on the night of December 13th, 2005, the pumps did what they were told. They kept pushing water up the mountain, and up, and up, filling a bowl that the plant's own computer believed was still half empty when it was already spilling over the edge. There was no spillway, nowhere for the extra water to safely go, and a backup alarm that should have caught it had been mounted too high on the wall to trip in time. So in the pre-dawn dark, just after 5 a.m. on December 14th, the water climbed over the top of the wall and began pouring down the outside of it. And a rock-fill wall is not built to have water pour over it. It began to wash away from the outside in. Within minutes, a section of that wall, more than 600 feet of it, simply let go, and 1.5 billion gallons of water came off the top of that mountain all at once. You need to understand the scale of what that means. At its peak, the water was moving at 270,000 cubic feet per second. That's more water than you'd find going over most large rivers. It tore a scar 1.75 miles long straight down the forested mountainside, ripping out full-grown trees, moving boulders the size of cars, scouring the slope down to bare rock. A wall of water 2 stories high, in the dark, aimed straight at the valley below. And there was one house in the valley below. At the bottom of that mountain sat Johnson's Shut-ins State Park, a beloved Missouri swimming spot where the Black River squeezes through billion-year-old volcanic rock. And in a house right there in the park lived the man who ran it, the park superintendent, Jerry Toops. He was 42, his wife Lisa was 38, and they had 3 little kids asleep in that house. Tanner, who was 5, Tara, who was 3, and the baby, Tucker, just 7 months old. Lisa was up early, feeding the baby on the couch, when she heard it coming. A roar like nothing she'd ever heard. The water hit the house like a head-on collision. Jerry later said it felt like the wall of the bedroom just exploded inward. The house was torn clean off its foundation and swept away, carried a 1/4 of a mile through the freezing dark with the whole family still inside it, tumbling in the water. Jerry got to what was left of the roof, and then the water pulled him off too, and he grabbed a tree in the pitch black and held on. Somewhere out there in the flood were his wife and his 3 babies, and he could not see any of them. Now, this is the part of the story where you brace yourself, because a 2-story wall of water hit a sleeping family in the dark and carried their house a 1/4 mile down a mountain. Every single one of them lived. All 5 of them. Somewhere in that impossible freezing chaos, the whole family was pulled out alive. Little Tara, 3 years old, got herself out partly because she'd just had swimming lessons. 5-year-old Tanner was found near death from the cold and would spend weeks in the hospital, but he made it. Every one of them out of that black water alive. Jerry Toops said one thing afterward that stuck with me. He said, "You know, I believe in miracles, and I believe this was one." The flood destroyed nearly 300 acres of the state park. Ameren was found responsible and paid a $15 million federal fine, at the time the largest fine in the history of American energy regulation, plus around $180 million to the state of Missouri. And then here's the last thing they did, the thing I did not expect. They didn't walk away from the mountain battery. They rebuilt it. This time out of solid roller compacted concrete, one of the biggest concrete dams of its kind in the country. They rebuilt the park, too, better than before. And in the spring of 2010, they flipped the switch, and the mountain battery came back to life. It's still up there right now. Tonight, while you sleep, that plant is quietly pumping a lake back up into the sky, storing the power nobody's awake to use, so it's there for you tomorrow. Because it turns out the crazy 1963 idea was the right one all along. As the whole world races to store wind power and solar power, water batteries like Taum Sauk are suddenly the hottest idea in energy again. The mountain that broke open in the dark was decades ahead of its time. So the next time you plug in your phone and don't think twice, remember there's a mountain in Missouri that spent the night lifting a lake into the sky just to hand you back a little bit of lightning.